Well, here we are. There's some of us were gathered to have an open technical discussion following Ellen's presentation last week. Um, she's always very inspiring. If you didn't get a chance to check it out, the link is it's in the email that you got this from, the old you can find it on River Shared Monday Talks. I can't remember what the pull down is. Pretty easy. I can find it, so I'm sure most of you can find it too then. And if you can't, let us know. Definitely inspiring talk about how, what was her talk titled? Messy. What was it titled, y'all?
Messy rivers.
There you go. Yeah, well, messy's better. That's kind of the message I got. And I like it because it didn't really, it really reaches out to a broad audience. And helps to kind of align what perceptions could be, and it gets us to thinking about how different perceptions could be. And I think as practitioners, we try to be mindful, and it's good to be reminded to be mindful to incorporate new ideas and just nature in nature, and not just be formulaic and crank out some widgets. So that said, it leads me to wonder outside of our practice, which is where most of the activity happens or doesn't happen as far as social perspectives and paradigms. And I think this is a good conversation, the way she frames it, um, beyond our inner circle of mystics that work on streams. So all that to say, I guess that's a lot of commentary to unpack, but did anyone else have any initial reactions or curiosities? Take the floor. Well, I don't all speak at once. Who didn't get a chance to, does anyone on the call not get a chance to hear the talk?
I didn't. This is Eric.
Oh, good. Yeah, Eric, it was if you've ever read Ellen's work or seen her speak, she talked a lot about the shifting the baseline of perception, what constitutes healthy and what is a river. Started there, excuse me. And then she spoke toward heterogeneity and at different levels from geologic and vegetation to fluxes of water, sediment, wood, and how that contributes to richness, diversity of habitat and species. Um, Also, the heterogeneity serves resistance and resilience of the system and overall retention of resource. So yeah, she had also brought to us evidence cases in point where messy is healthy, specifically looking at valley bottom organic carbon storage and stream retention, denitrification and biomass, and then floodplain biogeochemical mosaics. And those were all really good words of case studies where there was measured benefits and measured evidence of all of this healthiness. So it leads me to think, when we talk about stream restoration and perceptions are different, there's this inferred acknowledgement, where what we think or what one person thinks is healthy or versus another. And it feels like we're chasing metrics on this matter. Does anyone feel that way?
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's.
if I could comment on that, so it's kind of one of the things coming to this as an educator and an outsider to the work that you do. I mean, I'm certainly an appreciator of it in that I spend a lot of my recreational time in streams. But I think part of the task that I face in the education community and working with students and working with communities is getting them to understand the value of waters, whether that's rivers, streams, whatever that is, and then to understand that value from the standpoint of, in some cases, those waters need to be repaired and the implications of that value that it has within their community. And being able to communicate that articulately is really important. And I am glad that this conversation is coming up to help drive that, because I think in some cases, like you talked about, you're concentrated on fixing or doing the widgets, making the widgets and doing the stuff, but are the communities that you're impacting involved in an understanding of what those widgets are going to do for them? So that's my comment on it.
No, that's really good. I think somewhere Ellen pointed us toward a website at the college at Colorado State, and it said that it was a quote on there, and I can't remember it. It said something like, "Streams are not amenities; they're gifts." Is that right? Do you guys remember that? What is it? A river is more than an amenity; it is a treasure. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so like you say, Eric, connecting and reaching out and getting the message out, but it's not just all nuts and bolts. I mean, there's more to making that connection. Like just sharing, looking at pictures together when she presents stuff, we're getting aligned, kind of, getting our heads together. It reminds us of experiences. And so I guess where I feel kind of always drawn on this topic is it goes deeper than just the descriptions and the understanding. It's the experience, and having that experience of being at and around the river. And I feel like people are drifting from those experiences. And so describing a healthy stream, that's good, but unless people are standing there in it, it's kind of hard for them to paint that picture. David.
Yeah, so one thing that I think is interesting with this messy rivers aspect that Ellen had talked to us about last week is that the biodiversity associated with a messy river is very complex. And we say we want something messy because it's easy, but really what we're saying is we want a richness in biodiversity. We want a richness in the ability of bed to be stable against deformation. So sometimes that requires caddis larvae to kind of glue the beds together. And I think when we start looking at rivers and say, hey, this is something that we find valuable, and as a community, we want to come back to the idea that these rivers are valuable, a lot of what we're focusing on is also related to the diversity of the richness and the diversity that we get in natural areas from having a lot of different species, even when we don't completely understand those species. But yet when you're in those areas, you realize there's something so much bigger than just ourselves or just our planning. So I look at the messy rivers aspect as being a really neat leeway into the biodiversity side of ecosystem restoration and saying, hey, this is what we really want to be focused on. And what do we do with that next? And how can we use that when it comes to things like in our communities to get people focused around enjoying rivers, and then also focused on using rivers as an example of what health could look like in a community. So, having more biodiversity, having knowing that there's something bigger than just ourselves out there is all good ideas from a mental health standpoint as well. So I'm excited about kind of pushing the idea of a messy river and being able to look at complexity and biodiversity. Now, the thing that I had that is always had a little bit of a difference in is that to me, it's hard to really quantify the matrix for what a messy river looks like. And I feel sometimes like we're walking backwards as a community. So we're basically saying, okay, well, we want a messy river and we want to do a process-based design, and these are the processes that we want to account for. But then sometimes we just don't know what we're trying to account for in a messy river. So it makes it very difficult for us as a community to say, okay, well, without using a reference, we're going to say, hey, this is what a messy river should look like. I think that's where that idea of matrix comes in at. Um, but I love the idea of the fact of trying to make the restoration projects uh, more unique, more site specific, uh, and more complicated.
That's good. I like that too, David. That's good commentary. Toward that, it's both in practice what we're doing and where we're doing it, but I mean it feels like there's more outreach and messaging, getting it out there, getting, like Eric mentioned, working with people and communicating that. But I mean it's weird, when you think of restoration or ecology, everyone has a different vision. Like somebody watched Augusta last weekend and thought that had some messy creeks on it. They and so like we're so not calibrated to messy. And since we're not, then we try to chase these numbers around, and some of them are meaningful and some of them are conflicting and some of them are confusing and some of them are just hard to get. So, I don't know. I feel like, we can keep chasing numbers or start doing more things. I don't know, but we don't want to do the wrong thing. Go ahead, somebody.
I was going to say your observation about people being disconnected from nature is very apt. I just got done. I just brought 100 fifth grade students out to a park, and for 90% of them, that was the first time that it had ever been to a park that was in 15 minutes of their school. And the shock and awe of these kids as they came off the bus of seeing that many trees concentrated in a place that wasn't manicured or wasn't something where that someone had mowed around, that was a shock to them. And I think so many people, unless they spend time on the water or a creek in their backyard or have the opportunity to go to a river, just don't understand what the value of these messy rivers are and why should I care about them. So the one organism we can't forget that's involved in our rivers are the people that live around them. And that, in some cases, they may not realize they're part of a watershed. And so, the conversations you have to include the people as an organism within that ecosystem as well.
Yeah, Ellen talked about she did there was a picture of the Times River in England, I think it was, and she kind of showed what the historic photos of what that picture looked like, with a picture of a boy and the dog out, sitting next to the bank in this kind of fairly manicured system. And it leads to the question, Mathis Kondoff and others have said that we have a social tendency towards meandering rivers because we're kind of used to seeing them. And I think this talk of messy rivers is trying to get people connected to wild awe in nature and be kind of amazed by being in nature, opposed to once they see something that's kind of messy in nature, just saying, well, that's a place where mosquitoes are going to breed. That's a place where you're going to find a snake. That's a place I don't want to be at. That's a swamp hole of death, So
mud puddle of death, David. Mud puddle of death. Get the quote right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, you're good points. How are people supposed to calibrate what an idea of a river should be, what messy should, what it should look like if it's almost a amenity to have experienced, it is a treasure, but just to have a lot of people just don't have an experience. So it's almost like before you can really advance the cause, you have to get people to understand the cause, and people don't understand basics about rivers. And that's not being critical. It's just, we know more about social media than the creek in our backyards. A lot of people, when I say we.
Yeah. Well, and it's still a tough one. We go into the urban environments in particular, and people think that the best treatment of a river is still concrete in a lot of places. So they'll be like, "Well, that river needs to be fixed. Can we re-concrete it?" Like, oh, okay. So I do think that there's has to be some sort of a shift on just how we look at rivers, and I really appreciate Ellen's work and the work of others in trying to just show how this messiness leads to the richness and the biodiversity. And it's the same in our communities. I think about when it comes to, if everybody in your community looks exactly like you, talks exactly like you, has exact same opinions as you, then you're not going to have a whole lot of richness. You're not going to be challenged much. You might be comfortable, but ultimately, it's not going to be something that's resilient, and it's not going to be something that will help you grow, be able to hear things differently. You'll have a lower level of humility when you think of the fact that, hey, everybody thinks exactly like me, so I must be right. And you generally don't have a whole lot of hope because you don't think of the person next to you and be like, okay, well, those people over there are doing things different, and I don't have much hope that they'll change because they're doing it wrong. They don't understand it. So, yeah, I do look at this idea of kind of how we're connected to water features and rivers, and how communities are connected, and kind of the messiness and the confusion of it, and the biodiversity of these systems, as being an example of something that's good in nature that we can try to appreciate when we see it, opposed to something that we try to manage, manipulate, and change.
Yeah, it's almost like a conversation to continue to advance with different audiences at different levels, and everybody, and including ourselves, are moving along in their own narrative. But rather than to try to resolve the conversation, and it's just a conversation to continue to have and grow with others, whether you're dealing with somebody who's gonna have a direct bearing on a project and the messiness of it. You know, they might have a completely different perspective as well. But just to keep that conversation moving forward, not all municipal administrators are going to feel the same. Some of them are more have a different perspective of what messy is, and might swing the direction of natural versus unnatural. But still, like, rather than thinking about it as a conversation to resolve, a conversation to persist.
Well, Josh, maybe if we don't have anybody else that's really excited about the discussion, unless you guys have anything else you want to say, we could probably move on to the inspirational side a little bit earlier today.
Hey, I wanted to just say thanks again for getting Ellen on. I appreciate her taking the time. That was really that's great. That was great.
Yeah, and anybody that's on the line that has somebody that wants to talk from a technical standpoint, we want to hear voices that come from different backgrounds, from a technical standpoint and from an inspirational standpoint. But we want them to be of value to people. So if you have somebody that you think might be a good speaker, make sure you contact Ellen, who's on the line, or myself, and we'll try to line up them as a speaker. So.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah.
All right, Eric, are you interviewing Maiwat today, or how is the rest of the?
I'll be happy. I will be happy to introduce him.
Okay.
All right.